They were the identical jokesters with country charm, the Hager Twins, Jon and Jim, who made millions laugh on Hee Haw. With matching smiles and harmonies, they became household names, but behind the synchronized laughs and clean-cut image lived two very different men, each carrying hidden pain. Fame gave them a platform, but it also took its toll. What really happened when the camera stopped rolling? How did their lives unfold in the shadows of the show that made them stars? And what was never revealed until now? The truth about the Hager twin final years was something no one saw coming. They weren't born in Nashville or Hollywood, nor even into the same family. But Jim and Jon Hager, identical twins born in Chicago on August 30th, 1941, were adopted together by a Methodist minister and his wife, who raised them in the heart of the Midwest. Growing up in Park Ridge, Illinois, they were inseparable, so much so that even their teachers struggled to tell them apart. It wasn't just their appearance that matched. It was their rhythm, their humor, their uncanny ability to finish each other's sentences, and above all, their shared love of music. By age 11, they were singing in church choirs, performing at school functions, and practicing guitar by night, imitating the harmonies of the Everly Brothers while dreaming of the big stage. That dream eventually carried them to the West Coast, where they enrolled in a performing arts college in California, landing small roles in local theater and working odd jobs to get by. Their big break came not from an audition, but a chance meeting. One night, while playing at a small Los Angeles club, they caught the attention of Buck Owens' team. Owens, a rising country music star, recognized their raw, genuine charisma and brought them into his orbit, soon hiring them as guitarists and backup vocalists. They didn't mind being in the background. They were just happy to be there. But it wasn't long before their presence stole the spotlight. In 1969, CBS greenlit a new variety show, a quirky, country-themed comedy hour meant to rival the urban appeal of Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. That show became Hee Haw, with Owens as co-host. When producers sought fresh-faced country talent, Buck suggested the Hager Twins. It was a move that launched them into overnight fame. Dressed in matching outfits and sporting their signature blonde bangs, they quickly became audience favorites, not just as musicians, but as comedians, actors, and all-around entertainers. Their timing was sharp, their jokes landed, and their chemistry was unmatched. America fell in love. Fan mail poured in, women adored them, kids imitated them, and they became the heartthrobs of the hay bale. But fame has a way of hiding cracks. While the world saw two smiling, singing brothers on Saturday night TV, few knew that behind the curtain, Jim and Jon were not rising evenly. Even at the height of their fame, the duo was drifting apart. On the Hee Haw set, they were naturals, delivering punchlines in cornfield skits and singing heartfelt ballads with ease. But behind the scenes, the pressure to maintain their cheerful, squeaky clean image was wearing them down, especially Jim. The quieter, more introspective twin, Jim was deeply sensitive to the demands of stardom. While Jon thrived under the spotlight, Jim often withdrew after filming, choosing silence over celebration. The twins had always done everything together, but now their reactions to fame were beginning to diverge. The demands of the show were relentless. Taping schedules ran long. The humor had to be sharp yet family-friendly, and the producers didn't want anything too real. The Hagers, talented songwriters and guitarists in their own right, were rarely allowed to showcase their own material. Instead, they were boxed into a formula: laugh, sing, repeat. Over time, they began pushing back, wanting more input, more originality, and more space to evolve. But the Hee Haw machine didn't bend easily, and the conflict started to wear them down. Off camera, Jon sought distraction in the nightlife of Nashville and Los Angeles, becoming known among insiders as the outgoing twin, the one who dated starlets, frequented clubs, and chased new experiences. Charming, quick-witted, and always ready with a joke, Jon seemed to thrive in social circles. Jim, on the other hand, grew more private, turning inward. Some say he struggled with depression long before it had a name. Others mention quiet battles with prescription medication long before such battles became national headlines. Neither brother ever spoke publicly about these struggles. They were too proud, too loyal to the image, and maybe too afraid of what would happen if the truth came out. Still, those close to them noticed. There were days when Jim would arrive on set emotionally checked out, only to snap back into character the moment the cameras rolled. Rumors swirled, not of tension between the brothers, but of inner battles within themselves. It wasn't easy being half of an image, and though their act was built on being identical, they were becoming anything but. The public adored their sameness, but offstage, their differences were pulling them into separate orbits. While the world laughed along with the Hager twins, one of them was slowly, quietly beginning to fall apart. The distance between the spotlight and the soul was growing wider, and the next chapter would show just how far they would drift. That chapter began when Hee Haw officially ended its syndicated run in 1993, marking the close of an era not just for country television but for the twins themselves. For nearly 25 years, Jim and Jon had been weekly fixtures in America's living rooms, delivering laughs, harmonies, and a brand of homespun charm that felt timeless. But once the cameras stopped rolling, so did the steady rhythm of their lives. Without the structure of the show, everything changed. The booking slowed, the fan mail thinned, and the spotlight that once felt so warm began to flicker out. At first, they tried to keep the momentum alive with appearances at state fairs, charity events, and small country festivals, even recording a gospel album together, something they had always wanted to do. But the crowds weren't the same, the energy wasn't the same, and without the Hee Haw machine behind them, they were no longer a guaranteed draw. Fame was slipping through their fingers, and they felt it deeply. For Jon, the decline was frustrating. He had long dreamed of branching out into film, writing meaningful songs, pitching TV concepts, even exploring Christian television, but doors that once opened automatically now stayed shut. Jim took it even harder. Without the constant distraction of rehearsals, filming, and touring, he was left alone with thoughts he had buried for years. He began to isolate, rarely answering calls or showing up at social events. The brightness in his eyes, the spark fans had loved, seemed to fade. Though he still performed with Jon occasionally, it was clear he was no longer fully present. Their once effortless twin dynamic now felt strained. They were still brothers, still best friends, but a quiet sadness lingered between them. They never spoke of it publicly. The Hagers didn't like to show cracks in the armor, but those closest to them saw it. The pain of irrelevance, the confusion of identity, the haunting question so many performers face. Who am I when no one's watching? They tried to find answers in small ways, with Jim even attending spiritual retreats in search of something to hold on to. Jon explored a deeper faith and spent time volunteering, but healing proved difficult. The past loomed large. The silence was loud, and for the first time in their lives, the Hager twins weren't sure what came next. Fame had given them everything, but now it had quietly left them behind, and what they were about to face in the years ahead would test their bond more than ever before. For decades, the Hager twins projected an image of bachelor charm, always smiling, always flirtatious, always just out of reach. Their clean-cut looks and identical wardrobes made them the heartthrobs of Hee Haw, adored by fans across the country. But behind the stage presence, behind the synchronized grins, were two men whose love lives told a very different story. Jon Hager, the more outgoing of the two, had a string of high-profile relationships that never made headlines but stirred whispers in Music City. One long-rumored romance involved a well-known country singer, possibly even a fellow cast member on Hee Haw. Though Jon never confirmed it publicly, several insiders noted their closeness off camera, the late-night phone calls, the carefully hidden weekends away. As with many industry romances, it fizzled quietly, leaving behind more memories and regrets. He dated on and off for years, sometimes seriously, sometimes casually, but always cautiously. Friends say Jon never quite let his guard down, not all the way. His heart, though big, had limits. He didn't chase commitment. He chased companionship, a subtle, constant search for connection that rarely lasted. Jim Hager, on the other hand, was different. He had fewer relationships but felt them more deeply, and one in particular changed everything. In the late 1980s, Jim fell for a woman he met during a charity event in Tennessee. She wasn't famous. She wasn't part of the industry. But to Jim, she was everything. For the first time, those close to him saw something rare, a side of Jim that was open, relaxed, even joyful. He spoke about settling down, starting over, building a quieter life with her away from the pressures of television. But that dream would never come true. She passed away unexpectedly. Some say from illness, others suggest a car accident, and the details were never fully shared. Jim stopped talking about it. But after her death, something in him closed for good. He never seriously dated again, never pursued marriage, never tried to replace what he lost. It was as if a part of his soul had been buried with her. And while the public continued to see Jim and Jon as fun-loving bachelors, the reality was far more fragile. Their romantic lives were marked not by passion and play, but by heartbreak and distance. They had learned it early on that love was complicated when you lived in a spotlight built for two. The fame that made them stars also made real relationships nearly impossible, always traveling, always performing, always being watched, so they leaned into the safety of each other. Brothers first, always. It became their comfort, their fallback, their constant. But even that wasn't enough to fill the spaces left behind by love lost. As the years went on, the loneliness only deepened. The women came and went, but the ache stayed, and no camera, no applause, no Saturday night laugh could ever fill that void. What followed in the next chapter was not romance. It was reckoning, a slow, painful realization that time was running out. And for one brother, it would run out too soon. By the mid-2000s, the Hager Twins were a long way from the bright lights of Hee Haw. They still performed now and then, mostly at state fairs, small-town festivals, or nostalgia shows that catered to longtime fans, but time had taken its toll. Their matching blonde hair had faded to gray, the crowds had grown smaller, and the energy that once made them famous had begun to dim. Jim Hager, especially, was showing signs of wear. His once vibrant personality had been replaced by long silences, unpredictable moods, and a tiredness that went deeper than age. He was still quick with a joke when prompted, still professional when the curtain rose, but those closest to him saw the cracks. They spoke in whispers about his medications, about his isolation, about the depression he had quietly battled for years. Unlike Jon, who found small purpose in spiritual work and occasional songwriting, Jim seemed stuck. He no longer talked about the future, barely mentioned the past. He simply existed. The brothers had always been close, but something had changed. Jon began speaking for both of them in interviews while Jim would nod, smile, maybe add a word or two. But his spark, the light that had made him half of one of the most beloved duos in country television, was fading fast. On May 1st, 2008, that spark went out completely when Jim Hager was found dead in his Nashville apartment at the age of 66, the cause an apparent heart attack. To those who knew him best, it wasn't just his heart that had given out, but everything, the years of silent pain, mounting health issues, loneliness, and the struggle of living in the shadow of who he used to be. Jon was devastated. They had been inseparable for over 6 decades through fame, failure, laughter, and grief. But now, for the first time in his life, Jon Hager had to face the world alone. He didn't speak publicly after Jim's death, didn't release a statement or hold a press conference. He simply vanished. Friends said he was inconsolable, wandering their shared home in silence, unable to sleep in the room where they once rehearsed. The guitars stayed where Jim had left them. The stage costumes remained untouched. For Jon, it wasn't just grief, it was disorientation. He had lost more than a brother. He had lost his mirror, his balance, his second half. In interviews years earlier, he had once joked that the hardest part about being a twin was, you never know who you'd be without the other guy. After Jim's death, he found out, and it was a truth he could barely survive. What followed wasn't a second act, but a slow unraveling, a life lived in quiet mourning that would end just as heartbreakingly as it began, with the sudden loss of a twin and the question of whether one's soul could ever truly exist without the other. After Jim's death, something inside Jon simply stopped working. The world had known them as a Hager Twins, a package pair with 2 smiles, 2 voices, and 2 matching sets of cowboy boots. But now, for the first time in 66 years, Jon had to live as one, and the weight of that was unbearable. Friends tried to reach out after the funeral, but Jon wouldn't answer his phone. The laughter he once shared so freely vanished. His face grew gaunt, his voice quiet, his steps slower. He refused interviews, declined appearances, and turned down every offer, tributes, nostalgia specials, even a Hee Haw reunion. When asked why, he would simply say, I don't know how to be half of anything. In private, he kept everything the same. Jim's guitar remained in its stand. The matching stage outfits hung in the closet perfectly pressed, and Jim's side of the breakfast table was still set each morning, as if he might walk in at any moment and crack a joke about being late. But he never did. Jon had always been the stronger of the two, more outgoing, more resilient, more willing to take on the chaos of life. But without Jim, he had no reason to fight anymore. They had shared everything: birthdays, melodies, hotel rooms, heartbreaks, even their silences. And now Jon was facing a kind of quiet that felt unnatural, alien. He wandered between past and present, sometimes playing old tapes of their Hee Haw performances, smiling softly at Jim's timing before staring blankly at the screen when it ended. When fans mailed him letters of support, he rarely responded. It wasn't rudeness, it was emptiness. One close friend later said, "Jon didn't die when Jim died, but something vital inside him did." The grief had settled into his bones. No drugs, no distractions, no new beginnings, just memory and loss. And though he was never diagnosed with terminal illness, Jon's health began to decline rapidly within months of Jim's passing. Doctors couldn't explain it. His vitals were stable, but he looked tired, worn, like a man who had already said his goodbye and was only waiting for the curtain to fall. On January 9th, 2009, less than a year after Jim's death, Jon Hager died in his sleep at their shared Nashville home. He was 67 years old. No warning, no medical emergency, just gone. Some said it was a broken heart, others poetic timing. But those who knew the Hager twins best believed something simpler. Jon just couldn't live without his brother. In life, they had been mirror images. In death, they were reunited. And maybe, for two boys who had come into the world side by side, it was only right they leave it the same way, together. To most viewers, the Hager twins were just lovable clowns in country costumes, always laughing, always smiling. But there was a side of their story the cameras never captured. Offset, Jim and Jon weren't just performers. They were artists, songwriters, men who desperately wanted to be taken seriously. Over the years, they pitched ideas to Hee Haw producers, original songs, sketches with more heart, even dramatic moments. But the show wanted laughs, not layers. So the twins kept performing the same bits while their creative hopes quietly faded. Jim especially grew more withdrawn. Some noticed changes. His energy dipped, his timing slowed. He stopped pushing back. Jon, ever protective, began speaking for both of them in meetings. At home, their life was simpler but still centered around each other. They played music together, rehearsed just for fun, even if no stage was waiting. In one private clip, Jim forgets a chord and laughs, "Let's just fake it like we always do." Jon laughs too, a line meant as a joke, but heavy with truth. Because for all their fame, much of their life had been about keeping up appearances. The real story, the pressure, the disappointments, the emotional weight, was never part of the script until now. The story of Jim and Jon Hager isn't just about music or comedy. It isn't even just about fame. It's about what happens when two lives are so intertwined that the world only sees them as one. And maybe that's how they wanted it. For decades, the Hager twins entertained America with a synchronized act that felt effortless. Two voices, two hearts, one rhythm. But when the laughter faded, what was left was something far more human. They were not flawless stars. They were men who longed to be taken seriously, who craved authenticity in an industry built on illusion, who lived quietly through heartbreak, frustration, and the slow ache of fading relevance. And still, they never turned on each other. In the end, their greatest success wasn't a chart-topping single or a perfect punchline. It was loyalty. The kind of loyalty that doesn't waver even when the spotlight disappears. The kind that survives loss. The kind that makes you hold on even when you're the only one left. Jon once said that being a twin meant never having to explain yourself. Jim already knew. And maybe that's why, when Jim died, Jon followed just months later. Not out of illness, not out of despair, but out of love. The Hager twins came into this world side by side, and left it almost the same way. Their story, often overlooked in country music history, is not just a footnote. It's a quiet masterpiece of brotherhood, loyalty, and unspoken strength. They were two men living one life. And maybe, just maybe, that's a kind of legacy no spotlight could ever fully capture.